Be ready. Manchester City get Claudio Echeverri transfer update after Pep Guardiola swiped Manchester City midfielder. Claudio Echeverri is on loan at Leverkusen, but is struggling for minutes and didn't play at all on Tuesday. Bayer Leverkusen manager Kasper Hjulmand talked up the potential in Claudio Echeverri, but could not rule out a January return to Manchester City. The 19-year-old was back at the Etihad for the Champions League game on Tuesday night, but was an unused substitute as the German side picked up a 2-0 win. Echeverri has had to get used to being on the bench this season, despite having been given the number 9 shirt when he signed on a season-long loan that he hoped would confirm his place in the Argentina squad for the 2026 World Cup. Instead, he has barely had a kick under first Erik ten Hag and then Hjulmand, with more experienced players preferred in the positions that he wants to play. That was also the case on Tuesday, despite Echeverri and fellow youngster Elias Ben Seguir being called over by the Leverkusen coach at a point in the first half to make them aware of a potential situation they could help in. They are doing good, and they are very good players. I am trying to prepare the players for the scenarios of the game. We did it before, said Hjulmand. There were some very clear structures in the game at that moment, and I wanted them to recognise this and be ready for those scenarios. When we play like this with 3 midfielders and 2 strikers, it's not their normal positions, so I have to prepare them a little for that. But at the end of the day, I thought the players on the pitch were doing very well. Patrick Schick was suffering a little, but was so important in set pieces, so this time I said, we will stick to the players on the pitch. But it's 2 very good players with big potential. Very young players. Their time will come. They play a position where we have the most players, so there is a lot of competition for these players, but their time will come. City have been frustrated that Echeverri's time has not come sooner at Leverkusen, particularly having had lots of interest from clubs interested in taking him for the summer. Girona's sporting director said last month that they had wanted the midfielder, but that his agent had preferred the Leverkusen move, and Guardiola took a couple of swipes at the player's representatives when asked about his future on Monday. There have been concerns for months at the Etihad over the lack of minutes for Echeverri, and a recall is a possibility if the situation does not improve. Asked about that after his side's victory, Hjulmand indicated that they have had to be careful with the Argentine's fitness to ensure he is robust enough for regular minutes, but that there are plenty of positives. We like Claudio. We are happy to have Claudio. When he arrived to us, he had only played 110 minutes the whole year, he said. He had problems when he started his first match. We are trying to build a young player with great potential. We like Claudio. We like him in the dressing room. We like him on the pitch. We can see potential in Claudio. Let's see. Pep Guardiola hints at transfer frustration as £70 million rated star could start for Manchester City versus Leverkusen. Manchester City will look to get back to winning ways in the Champions League against Bayern Leverkusen this evening. City are growing frustrated with young talent Claudio Echeverri's loan spell at Bayer Leverkusen due to his lack of playing time since moving to the Bundesliga club. When questioned about a potential January recall, Guardiola indicated that the player's beautiful agent holds the key, suggesting an underlying annoyance about how the situation has unfolded. City defender Josko Gvardiol revealed that the previous season was the worst of his career. Gvardiol now feels the overall situation and atmosphere in the dressing room is much improved this season, allowing him to get more rest and focus on competing for titles. Guardiola said that he was embarrassed and ashamed after an incident where he grabbed a TV cameraman's headset following City's defeat to Newcastle. The manager promptly apologised on the pitch, explaining that the emotional outburst was driven by his intense desire to defend his team, and Club City will look to recover from their Premier League defeat to Newcastle tonight. Guardiola is expected to rotate his squad, with Savinho possible starting on the wing and John Stones coming in at right back. Hugo Viana faces early scrutiny as £70 million Manchester City call questioned Manchester City forward. Savinho failed to impress off the bench again at the weekend and needs to show more after an eye-opening summer. Tottenham's transfer interest in Savinho this summer arrived suddenly and unexpectedly. The winger had just returned home with his Manchester City teammates from their only pre-season friendly and were less than a week away from their Premier League opener when the news dropped that Savinho could be off. Tottenham wanted him, and, as ever, City would be open to a deal at the right price. That felt like a surprise to supporters, with the verdict very much still out after a first season at the club, where he hadn't really taken off, but hadn't arrived into the best situation either. The potential was clear, and had been in evidence again during the Club World Cup, where he was picked to play more than anyone else, but the goal returns weren't quite there yet. More eyebrows were raised at Savinho's actions during the few weeks where he was potentially on the move. He suddenly came down with an injury that wiped him out for the entirety of the transfer window, and posting images on social media with packed suitcases hardly gave the impression that he wanted to stay at the Etihad. Ultimately, City's £70 million valuation wasn't met, and a decision was made by City before the window shut to keep Savinho. They then went one further and handed him a 6-year deal that ties him to the Etihad until 2031. If Savinho spoke on that announcement of the areas of his game he still felt needed to improve, Sporting Director Hugo Viana went above and beyond what was necessary. He has so many excellent attributes. His potential really is limitless. He has superb natural ability, works incredibly hard, day in, day out, and he is humble. 2 months on from that, there is grumbling on pretty much every match day about how necessary it was first to reject Tottenham's interest, and secondly to give him a new contract second in length only to Erling Haaland. Many supporters who weren't too impressed with Savinho during the approach from Spurs are yet to be won over by his performances this season. With his only goal so far coming in the Carabao Cup game at League One side Huddersfield, it isn't hard to understand why. Too many performances have flattered to deceive, and the 21-year-old has failed to build on his excellent display at Villarreal last month. There is some mitigation in the fact that he appears better and more productive on the right wing, but has predominantly been used on the left, and he also has age on his side with the added caveat that the second season is often the charm under Guardiola. However, for some of his growing critics, it isn't even about output. In a number of his appearances off the bench this season, his application has been questioned. As Jeremy Doku and others rise to meet their challenges, Savinho must do more to earn appreciation again and justify his new deal. And having taken over from Cheeky Begiristain this summer, a sporting director recently named the best in the world, Viana has an early test of his judgment in both blocking a Savinho exit and then rewarding him with a bumper new deal. Nico Gonzalez has paid off gamble to vindicate critical Manchester City call. Manchester City midfielder Nico Gonzalez has allowed the Blues to move on from what was becoming a nagging issue for Pep Guardiola. It is just over a month since Manchester City touched down in Villarreal for their third Champions League game this season, and once again they were having to find a Rodri substitute. The Ballon d'Or winner was being honoured with a plaque outside the stadium of his former club and was due to do media commitments, but wasn't fit enough to be included in the matchday squad. Step forward Nico Gonzalez, who was still looking to show he could be a leading man for City. Gonzalez had watched Rodri star in the 2-0 win over Napoli to kickstart their European campaign, with the talk then of how good Rodri looked starting his second game in 5 days. Gonzalez had then replaced an indifferent Rodri in Monaco a few weeks later, only to concede a late penalty that allowed the home team to equalise and left Erling Haaland so angry he stormed off the pitch. The penalty seemed harsh, but it added to the narrative that has lasted over a year, that City without Rodri are missing a fundamental ingredient for success. 4 days later, it was Rodri's name on the team sheet at Brentford, only for him to suffer a hamstring injury in the 20th minute that required Gonzalez to rush onto the pitch. That moment forced City to be more cautious about how they used Rodri and take the plunge on Gonzalez. City's January signing has started 7 of the last 8 games, and may have had a clean sweep if a nasty blow in Villarreal hadn't forced him out of the Aston Villa game. It did not seem a coincidence that City's midfield did not look the same at Villa Park as it has in other games, as Gonzalez has really made his mark. He may not be Rodri, and City may not yet have a team capable of conquering all. They still have their vulnerabilities, as Saturday's defeat to Newcastle showed. However, the last month has moved Pep Guardiola's team on from the focus on Rodri, and that has only happened because Gonzalez has stepped up his level and flourished with the added responsibility he has been given. City will still be a better team when Rodri returns, and there is an argument for playing him with Gonzalez. But one of the major themes from last season's struggles that threatened to spill into this campaign suddenly feels like much less of an issue. If City can beat Leverkusen on Tuesday night and effectively book a top 24 place with 3 games to go, progress in the Champions League will feel a lot easier too. Manchester City promote 2 youngsters to first-team training ahead of Leverkusen fixture. A squad confirmed Manchester City have trained ahead of Tuesday's Champions League clash with Bayer Leverkusen at the Etihad. Academy midfielder Jadon Heskey and defender Jadon Katongo have trained with the Manchester City first team ahead of their Champions League fixture against Bayer Leverkusen on Tuesday. The 19-year-old Heskey made his first-team debut against Huddersfield in the Carabao Cup in September and was included in the session with 3 midfielders missing out. Mateo Kovacic is ruled out until February, while Rodri remains on the sidelines as City preach caution with his fitness. Calvin Phillips was also missing from training at the City Football Academy. Phillips isn't registered in the Champions League squad, but has been training. His absence meant Heskey was promoted. He has captained in the under-21s in Premier League 2 this season and has played every minute of that campaign under Ben Wilkinson. Katongo, 21, has featured in 3 Premier League 2 games this season and was promoted to first-team training, having been part of the under-21 squad recently. He is ineligible for UEFA Youth League games, with Wilkinson preparing an under-19 squad for that competition on Monday. Attacking midfielder Divine Mukasa also took part in training. Mukasa has played for the first team this season and was part of a 23-man squad ahead of the game against the